Director Bradley, you can take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Shelley. We will go ahead and call to order at 10:32. Shelley, if you could please do roll call.
All right. Alberto Gutierrez. Bob Ramsey.
Yes.
Just a little housekeeping. If you're on phone only and you find yourself muted, hit *6 to unmute. And then I'll continue on here with Brian Smith.
Here.
Chris Salvino. I heard you earlier. I'll continue with Dale Woolridge.
Here.
Dan Spate.
I'm here.
All right. Deborah Grande.
Here.
Gail Bradley.
Present.
Garth Gamer.
Present.
Glenn Kasperzik.
Present.
Heather Miller.
I'm here.
Howard Reed. James Hayden.
Present.
Jonathan Madam.
Present.
Melanie Mitros. Michelle Preston.
Present by phone.
Mike Duran.
Here.
Mike, sorry. Neil Williamson.
Here.
Rebecca Harrow.
Present.
Ryan Page. Bob Costello. Rodney Reed.
Present.
Sarah Parati. Todd Haramiel.
Present.
And Vivian Gellert.
Present.
Yep, we have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Shelley. Just to go over a quick announcements regarding Google Meeting. Just as a reminder, if you hover your mouse over the bottom part of your screen, the buttons will appear. This can turn your video camera on and off, mute and unmute yourself, as well as hang up. All attendees are advised that this is a public meeting. It is being recorded and will be posted to the ADHS website. So anything said verbally, viewed in webcam, or typed in the chat box will become part of the recording that is posted to ADHS's website. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. If you're attending only via phone and you'd like to speak, you press *6 to unmute yourself. Shelley will be displaying materials for the group, so there's no need to present your screen or share your screen. Shelley, Julia, and Allison are all monitoring the chat box, so if you have any questions and are online, you can put your questions in there. And for everyone's benefit, since this is an online meeting, please identify yourself before stating your remarks so we can capture who is speaking. Next up, we'll do attendance report. I think with the online meeting format, it certainly made it easier for people to attend, so we are doing quite well with attendance at this time. So thank you everyone for participating. In regards to vacancies, there are a number of vacancies to the council. The governor has recently reappointed Dan Spade, Bob Ramsey, Bob Costello, and Glenn Kasperzik. So congratulations to all 4 of you on your appointments. Anyone who is interested in serving on EMS Council, if you go to the Governor's Board and Commissions website, you can submit an application at that site. Next attachment is your 2021 meeting schedule. We have done our best to cross-check this against any national conferences to make sure that there are no major conflicts. Hopefully people have had a chance to review the schedule. We generally like to make sure that we give each statutory committee an opportunity to review and give input, and if there's no concerns or overlaps, we will approve the schedule for 2021. So next up, as I'm sure everyone is aware, we are very sad to have to say goodbye to Terry. He is going to be leaving us and going back to Montana. So unfortunately, in the times of COVID, the best we could do for his send-off was a plaque where we quickly removed our masks and were able to take a picture. Terry has been an integral part of the Bureau for the last 14 plus years, and I think it's going to be a real loss for the EMS system statewide to see Terry go. He's going up to the northern lands where he is already entering some snow. I believe they've already had snow while we're in 100+ degree weather here in Phoenix. But we really appreciate all of Terry's work over the years, and he will be greatly missed. I know many of you that have worked with him were disappointed that you couldn't be here in person. I think we all have had to unfortunately say goodbye remotely, but he will be here through September 25th. In his report, he'll go over a kind of transition plan, but I just wanted to take some time to really recognize and thank Terry for everything he's done for our EMS system since he's been here at the Bureau of EMS and Trauma. So thank you, Terry. You will be greatly missed.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. It's a bittersweet decision. My wife and I met and were in college together in Montana, and our children were all born there, and I did most of my EMS career there. So I'll be in the bureau chief position in Montana, and so when that came open, it was an attractive option, and it did happen to come open in July, the hottest month on record, and so that was influential. But I'm not very good at this sort of thing, but I would just say that it's been a pleasure to have an opportunity to work with all of you. Once I kind of figured out what my role was and got that straight, I think that we've had an opportunity to use the Bureau's resources to provide great service, or as best service as we can, to the stakeholder community, and appreciate your allowing me to participate in Arizona's EMS and trauma community. In discussing the method for filling my position with my boss, Jessica Regler, the assistant director, she asked that we advertise the position both internally here at ADHS, across the state, and across the country. So we have posted a job notice in a bunch of different places and are starting to receive applications as we speak. I anticipate that Jessica will and others will have a candidate review process in October, and it generally takes something on the order of 45 days to go through that process, and so hopefully we'll have a new bureau chief in place by mid-November. In the meantime, you will be able to reach out to any one of us here at the Bureau, just like you normally have. We're all open to calls and emails from our stakeholders 24 hours a day. Ethan Yanofsky will be the acting Bureau Chief, and of course Dr. Bradley and Ben Fisher will continue their work as well. So you've got a great opportunity to continue to get good service during this transition. Dr. Bradley, I have some rules update. Is this a good time for me to have that discussion?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Shelley, can you pull up the time frame for the rules?
It should be displaying right now. Can everyone
I was
see that?
looking at the wrong screen. I don't know whoever approved this great amount of rulemaking. There's a lot of rulemaking going on. Most of this work has already been completed. The air and ground vehicle licensure and inspection process has been completed. The area ambulance licensure part has been completed. We have just recently posted, I think last week or the week before, the first draft of the Article 9 CON rules. And then once we go through that process, we'll also be adding in the AR/CR tables and working on that as well. Specifically speaking about the Article 9 rules, many of you will remember that last fall, beginning in November, we requested public comment on the existing rules twice. We had very robust responses. And, excuse me. And the draft Article 9 rules that were released 2 weeks ago summarized those comments as best as we could using regulatory language. And so that draft that is out there on the streets today is in essence the draft of the stakeholder community. It represents those comments that we've received. Rule writing is an iterative process. So once these draft rules have been open and available and accepting comments through October 4th, we will hold our first public comment, our first public meeting. It will be a virtual meeting, and that'll be on October 14th from 1 until 4. And there will be several more versions of the rules drafted before we get to a final set of rules that are presented to GERC. I don't have a full timeline for that, but it will probably be in, towards late 2021, if I were to guess. Our first meeting on October 4th is going to be a bit of a challenge simply because we expect that we'll have a couple hundred or more people wanting to participate, which is great from our perspective, but it presents a bit of a logistical challenge. And so we're going to request that whenever possible, that organizations have a spokesperson for membership so that we can limit the number of people who are requesting to speak during the presentation. And then if you do hear something mentioned, it's not necessarily going to be important to re-mention it because we are required to take down those comments. And so, and Ruth Ann, as our rule writer, is very conscientious about that. We want everyone, though, to comment on to provide written comments via the survey, and there's a link to the survey. Or if you haven't seen the link to the survey, just get hold of anyone on my team and we'll make certain that you get that survey. That's the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any questions for me about the rule writing process or about the recruitment process for the bureau chief? All right, Dr. Bradley, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, Ben Fisher for service section update.
Morning, thank you. I'm going to try and go through some of these pretty quickly. Julia, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. We have been compiling some data related to cardiac arrest and deaths during COVID. We know that this is of interest to our stakeholders, and so we're trying to make this report available as soon as we are able to. We need to get a couple more things completed before we publish it, but I did just want to show that we are looking at it, and we have seen a pretty significant increase, particularly in the summer months around July, which I think most of our stakeholders will know from experience that there was an increase in cardiac arrest calls as well as some press around that. So we are looking at it. We do hope to publish this report here very soon. We just need to work out a couple more things. The STAB report was discussed in the previous meeting during the STAB group meeting. That was voted on and approved and will head to the director for her approval, and then it will be posted on our website as soon as we are able to get that approved, hopefully this week. So please look at it. We welcome feedback about it. And our stakeholders usually ask very helpful questions, and we are happy to respond to any questions. So please let my team know if there are things you see there that you would like more information about. The services section also has several additional dashboards that are going to be published on our website. Some are up already. We're waiting for the next kind of group to be posted. If you go to the Bureau's website on the left-hand side in the data and quality assurance section, we have added a data visualization tab, and as we add more dashboards, they will be posted there. The trauma registry to AZ Peers linkage is now working. Mary Benkert is able to provide instructions on how to actually participate in that. It does require an exact match right now, so if the date of birth and name do not match exactly, the data will not be imported. We are talking about whether or not we want to relax that, but for the trauma registrars, if you're interested in that, please reach out to Mary Benkert. And then with that, I'll kind of move into the next item C. So we are, I think this group in particular, we have presented multiple times about the issues we've had with the Cactus data set and data program. We've had many technical issues on our side with computer software and the program that we've written, despite an enormous amount of work to be able to produce this quality assurance data set every 6 months. And unfortunately, with the technical issues, we're not able to produce the report fast enough to do adequate quality assurance. And so we want to be able to provide useful information to agencies to be able to actually do quality assurance. And we feel like right now, every 6 months, sometimes that's even delayed because of our technical problems. It's not a useful report. We want to be able to agencies to be able to adjust poor scores. So if we run this report and they see that there are issues, they're able to kind of iterate quickly and make changes that would actually improve scores. So at this time, we're talking about ending the Cactus data set as it exists, and we would present alternatives for the January meeting. I do want to emphasize that the Bureau is really committed to coming up with a good data standard that agencies would have to meet. And so we're trying to explore some alternatives of what that would look like. This would not involve removing or adding any data elements or doing anything. It would use existing data that would all be the same. This would purely be a quality assurance effort for agencies to be able to improve their data completeness. So in the same spirit of Cactus, we're just getting to the point where I feel like the agencies aren't getting what they need from our Cactus report because of how difficult it is for us to run it. I'm happy to answer some questions about that, but I think in January, hopefully we will have some alternatives we're able to present where the council is comfortable that we have come up with something that is a good alternative. That's all I have. Dr. Bradley, I'm happy to answer questions about that if anyone has any or anything else.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions or comments regarding the Cactus data sets? I know that we've talked about this quite a bit. And I just really wanted to highlight as well our dashboards, which are on the Bureau's website. They're just an amazing amount of work that Vauxhall and her team have put in. Really, you're able to drill down looking at data by region and county, really significant information you can see. So I would just ask if you have some interest and have some time, take a few minutes and look at the Bureau's website. Again, if you go to the left-hand column, scroll down and look for data visualization. We have several different Tableau tables, which include both trauma and EMS data. So they're very useful, and I think this group would likely enjoy those. So thank you very much. Next, we're going to move to Standing Committee and Regional Council reports for a TEPI report. Rebecca?
Good morning. TEPI met on July 16th, and the usual business. In addition, we had a standing item to discuss the response, the sequence, I should say, for our discretionary reports for the year 2020. And there was a proposal from Dr. Gator to add to the list a report evaluating the effect of implementing COVID-19 administrative guidelines on EMS provider practices. And what they're wanting to look at is specifically see if there's any relationship to suggestions to limit oxygen administration or limiting endotracheal intubation, limiting CPAP, BiPAP, etc. So a lot of people liked that idea and recommended that it be shifted to second place in our sequence of reports that we want to see for our regular meetings. I won't talk about the cactus data set. Ben just covered that for us. Thank you, Ben. And other than that, we had our customary bylaw review, and Dr. Bradley, of course, provided us background on that. And the group has been working to get this done, and we expect to see revisions to be voted on at our next meeting in November. And our next meeting will actually be November 19th at 0900, and I'm sure we will be here on Global Meets. And that's all I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Next, Brian for Education Committee.
Good morning. The main focus of our Education Standing Committee was to review some of the training programs that are available at the Bureau of EMS website. A number of PowerPoint presentations for different topics have been developed over the years, and we have a review schedule for those to be looked at. And so we had 3 that were brought forth for review. One was for the identification and management of sepsis in the pre-hospital care environment, the brief resolved unexplained events, and chest compression only CPR. Those were reviewed by the committee, and all 3 of those were revised and reapproved to go back to be placed on the Bureau's website. And then we also worked on what we were going to be looking at for our bylaws revision, and there are going to be some changes in the positions that are available on there to even out representation between the regions a little bit more and to add a couple of more positions to it. Our next meeting will also be November 19th at 10:30.
Thank you very much. Brian, you're up. I think, did you cover both, or that was just education?
That was just education.
Excellent. Thank you. Next up is PMD.
Okay, at PMD, there were a couple of topics. One of them was very large and will be moving forward today to EMS Council and to Medical Direction Commission. In 2019, there was an update to the National Scope of Practice model, and so that has been being reviewed, looked at to see how that fits in with what we've been doing in Arizona. And there was a lot of work that has gone into how we implement this, and that will be moving forward to us later and to Medical Direction Commission later on. And that was the main focus of our meeting. Our next meeting will be November 19th at 1200.
All right. Thank you very much. Next on for regional councils, we have a written report from AIMS that is in the packet and being presented currently. We will scroll through that. All right, next, Sarah, are you on the line for a SAMES report?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bradley. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. The region continues to work with our stakeholders to approve and disseminate the COVID-19 grant funding. Again, a huge thank you from our region. We have had extensive requests and participation. And again, we have worked with our partners in the other regions to assist us in ensuring that we're staying consistent with the approvals and the verbiage, and have had a positive response from our membership. Yesterday, we held our quarterly medical directors meeting and had extensive participation. We continue to move forward on reviewing and approving new standing orders. All of our committees, as well as the regional council, have continued to remain on our regular scheduled meetings that we previously approved for the year. We were hoping that that would keep us consistent, and it certainly has done so. We've adjusted well to the Zoom platform and are making positive forward progress on all of our projects and initiatives. That's all I have, unless anyone has anything for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have the written names report attached. We will scroll through that. All right, thank you. And next up, Rod for the Western report.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Bradley. We did our last meeting was July 9th and was scheduled to be in Pine Lake. It ended up being a virtual meeting, as you might expect. And as Sarah alluded to, they've actually all worked really well. I think we're getting much too good at that. We did at that meeting approve our COVID provider assistance, and that whole process is nearly done. We have one agency we're looking to finish up with. Our regular provider assistance for this fiscal year is currently in progress. We're accepting applications from regional member agencies. And we will vote on those at our next meeting, which is scheduled for November 12th in Yuma. Hopefully it'll be in person, but we'll see. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Next up, Dale for the PACES report.
Yeah, this is Dale Woolridge. Regarding the PACES report, we have ongoing projects that we've been working on in regards to safe sleeping for children, developing a toolkit module. We've been interacting with the education committee to have that further revised and drafted out for education review. Hopefully in the near future. Our subcommittee on that has been very productive, so I want to thank them openly. The second project that we've been working on as far as a breakout project is that of children with special health care needs. And it's still more of an exploratory phase right now. If there's any components or tools that we can develop and make as a resource for EMS through the state, we'll be developing that and having it drafted for further review and education input. Julia Vinton, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, that's great. Thanks, Dale. Just the one thing I would add is that at our last meeting, we did review the surveys from the National EMS, or we reviewed the results from the National EMS survey that took place earlier this year. That survey will take place again this upcoming year in 2021 from around January to March. So just be on the lookout for further information about that. Thanks, that's all.
Great, and the Pediatric Advisory Committee is openly looking for participation in any of these breakout projects and looking for great ideas from the group. So please reach out to Julie if you'd like to join any of our discussions and meetings in regards to pediatric EMS related topics. Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Next on to discussion and action items. In your packets, we do have the meeting minutes from May 21st. If I can get a motion to discuss, amend, and approve the meeting minutes from May 21st, please.
Motion by Rebecca Haro.
Thank you, Rebecca. Can I get a second, please?
By May 10.
Thank you, Dr. Meadham. We will scroll through those meeting minutes. They are also in your packet as well. For those who've had a chance to review these, any amendments that you think need to be made to the minutes? Hearing no amendments, we attempted a couple different formats instead to do a good online vote. What we will do, I will first ask all those in favor to say aye, then we'll ask any opposed to say nay. If we have any nays, we will then go through the roll call and take an individual vote. We attempted that once and it was quite slow, so we figured we'll kind of do it all over vote, and then if there's any nays, we'll do individually. So all those in favor of approving the EMS meeting minutes from May 21st, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please say nay. Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. The meeting minutes are approved. Next action item is discuss and approve recommending the department seeking authority to move scope of practice out of rule. If I can have a motion and a second, please.
Maytime motion.
Thank you, Dr.
Rebecca
Maidum.
will second.
All right, thank you, Rebecca, for the second. Just to give a little bit of context behind this before we get into further discussion, one of the things that we have noticed is, I'm sure everyone is aware, that there has been a rule writing moratorium, I think on and off for at least 10 plus years. And as such, it's become difficult to keep up to date with some of the rule writing. With certain things, it's not as big of an issue. With things like the drug tables and scope of practice, that can become a bigger problem because scope of practice is updated at the national level every 2 years. And obviously, we have issues related to drug shortages. So in the last year and a half, we moved the drug tables out of rule and put them through a process where they get approved by standing and statutory committees, and then the director of ADHS approves them and the changes are made. We found that that has worked really well. It's a much more timely and streamlined process. And so we wanted to propose a similar process for scope of practice. Due to the fact that scope of practice is obviously a very important part of how we practice EMS, we're proposing a process where if we move scope of practice out of rule, the recommended changes would go to PMD. PMD would review and approve and discuss those. What is approved by PMD would then come to EMS Council as well as MDC for approval. And if all three committees approve that, that would then go to the director to approve as the final step of approval process. So our hope in doing this is that it will allow for more timely changes. We recognize that scope of practice has significant implications. We want to make sure that this is done very thoughtfully. PMD, we had really very great debate, and I'll go over that in the next action item as we discuss some of the recommended changes. But hopefully this process will allow stakeholder input, and it would be done over a course of at least 6 months, just based on the time frame for PMD, EMS Council, and MDC. So that is a little bit of a background, and I will open it up to further discussion now. Thank you.
Dr. Bradley, this is Rebecca. I just want to say that I think this is a very wise move for us to do this, knowing that there are frequently these moratoriums on rulemaking. Our national scope of practice could change 2 years from now, but we may not be able to go into rule and update anything for another 8 years. So in order for us to stay timely and on top of the current standard and scope of practice, I think this is a valuable way for us to have that flexibility we require. We will still have the oversight of all the statutory committees. So I don't feel that we are causing any hardship by removing this from rule and putting it into a separate table. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah, this is Bob Ramsey.
Yes,
and I don't disagree at all from what Becky is saying because of the advancements and the progress that the Department of Health Service and the councils have made. But I think it should be important that I just still need to ask some simple questions, is that we are advisory committees to the director. And so the director can, what is the check and balances, whether the director actually takes the evidence-based information? Because there were times that some of us remember a few decades ago when evidence-based didn't dictate what happened, in the political policy-based overrode some of the evidence-based. So my only comment is that the nervousness about these times are great, other times may not be, but maybe they'll never go back to the old days of different political processes where evidence-based was not taken into account, and only and there was some political agenda being run. Now, I don't believe that that's the case that we have right now, but I'm just concerned about I just need to understand in the context of it all, what is the director's role after it goes through this wonderful methodology that Becky and you guys have expressed? Is there an ability for a future political process to just ignore that and come up with something else? And that's my only comment. I think we should just talk about it a little bit, but I don't disagree with you guys at all. But I just wanted to, I thought it was important that I at least bring up that historical things that happened in the past.
Thank you. And I will turf to Terry in terms of kind of his, I know that he has taken up through his chain of command the process, so he may be able to better answer that. But I think bringing the discussion items forward in this meeting is really important, so thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bradley. Thanks, Bob. I think your comments are based on a lot of good background. The process that I discussed with my boss, assistant director, that she discussed with Kara, is that we would use a format that is identical to the methodology for changes to the medication tables based on the recommendation of the council. The medical director and the bureau chief would then create a transmittal letter outlining the changes and the rationale for the changes, which would then be submitted to the director for her approval. So I guess you are correct that there is a chance that the director may not approve a recommendation from the EMS Council in DC. In the just short of 15 years that I've been here, and I'm struggling to recall a time when the director hasn't taken the advice of the councils. Some of you may have a different recollection than I do, but it hasn't been an issue. Although I think you raise an intelligent perspective in the sense that I guess that could change in the future.
This is Bob again. Absolutely, I don't think since you've been here that occurred. But I think what you were able to articulate, for me at least, was that the notes that go along with that, in terms of that elaborate process with the attachments to it, certainly allows for some protection and checks and balances on that methodology. And so I think that detail of it going forward probably has safeguards built into it because of that detail. So thank you very much, Terry.
Yes, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Bob. I think, we definitely value transparency, and so we appreciate any conversation to make sure the committee does approve this, that everyone is comfortable with that decision. Any further comments? Yes.
Dr. Bradley, may I just share one other comment?
Yes, please.
As it is right now, to make a change in the scope of practice, we use EMS Council in DC as the place for making that recommendation. And so functionally, there's not much of a change in the sense that the councils make that recommendation and the director still has that authority to not approve that recommendation for a rule change. And so and Dr. Bradley and I considered this a lot. We feel that it's probably a more efficient use of the council's time to use this methodology, but it shouldn't change the authorities and the opportunities the councils have to influence the director's decision. And so that's why we felt pretty comfortable bringing this proposed change forward.
Dr. Bradley?
Yes.
It's Brian.
Yes, Brian.
So unfortunately, since our PMD meeting, I have had one section of this proposal that I've got some concerns about. And one of them is related to statute and how rules are maybe defining how statutes are written and may provide more detail about what statutes mean. And I believe that I'm going to present a possible conflict with statute over just one section of the proposal. So my question is that rules cannot conflict with statutes. By removing this from the exempt rules, is it going to have to meet the same criteria, or would it be able to be manipulated in such a fashion that it now could violate or be in conflict with a statute?
This is Bob Ramsey. If I could make just a comment, Brian. Number one, you're absolutely correct. Rules cannot conflict against the statute. In fact, the EMS law is much different than some of the other regulations within the state. A rule has to specifically, not generally, like what sometimes is tried, but specifically have to state the statute that it's coming from. So that means that the parent is the statute. So I think that whatever goes through to the director's office has to follow that guideline. If it's going to become even if it's exempt from the rule making, it's still a rule. So the rule has to be able to define exactly what statute it's coming from. And that has always been the EMS's protection from the generalization of rulemaking that's done in other agencies.
So this is Brian again. So this is currently a part of exempt rulemaking as defined in the administrative code versus regular rulemaking, but it is still exempt rulemaking. But I'm not so sure that by removing this from exempt rulemaking and just making it I guess we refer by rule to table 1 now. I guess if we did that, then that might cover it. If exempt rule or whatever, it would be the proposal that we use to get the drug box list out of exempt rulemaking, then that might cover it. I'm just concerned that whether that could be manipulated in the future or not, because it actually wouldn't be. This proposal means that it is not a part of any form of rulemaking in Arizona as defined in the administrative code, at least to the best of my interpretation and research at this point.
Hey, this is Dan Spate. I'm not obviously giving a regulatory answer because that's a long way from my specialty, but a practical and a historical one. What I would say is my understanding is every single bit of all of our work in the statutory committees, even actually by dotted line, regional councils, et cetera, and the process, regardless of whether it is rule or non-rule based action of the state standing committee, statutory committees, that all of those must be entirely compliant with statute. And it's always been my assumption that when actions go to the director to be signed off, that those have been vetted for ensuring that they are not in conflict with statute or rule. And to me, as long as nothing that our statutory committees recommend to the director are in conflict with statute or rule, I don't see any problem with the director who has, as you know, overarching authority. In fact, none of the decisions we make are real decisions. They are not finally approved until they are approved by the director. And I'm assuming the director and their office, their regulatory offices, are always highly sensitive to ensuring that no action that they approve is in conflict with any rule or statute. So again, that may not mean that your question of the actual regulatory humps are gotten over. But what I would say is, I would never think that anything we could do by removing something from rule puts the statutory committees in a position to make recommendations that are in conflict with statute or rule. So I'm not concerned from a practical and historical perspective.
Thank you. And I think to someone referenced, I can't recall who, when we did take the drug tables out of rule itself, what we put in its place was a reference to the director approved table 1, 2, and 3, so that it does reference the table within rule. It just does not have the actual full rule. So it references that the director of ADHS has approved the drug tables, but the actual kind of medication and quantity, those type of details are not included in rule. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. We would still reference scope of practice in rule. We would just not necessarily have each line delineated in rule if this group is comfortable with that.
And this is Terry. We have also run this by the Office of Administrative Rulemaking to make certain that it's consistent with both statute and rule, and have gotten an affirmative before bringing that to you all.
Dan Spade again. So that actually is extremely helpful, Terry. Dr. Bradley, do you need a motion, or is this before us, or is this just an announcement that the director, that the director's considering this, or do you need a motion from us?
I think we did officially get a first and a second. If I recall, I think we were in the discussion piece of it. Shelley, can you confirm that we did get a first and a second?
That is correct. I have Dr. Madam and Rebecca Harrell.
Thank you. Okay. So at this point, it would be if there's any further discussion. If there's no further discussion, we would move to a vote. Hearing no further discussion, we will move to a vote. Again, we will use the same format that we have done previously. Again, if we get any nays, we will then do a roll call vote. So all those in favor of recommending that the department seek authority to move scope of practice out of rule, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? All right. Thank you very much. Motion has passed. Next discussion and action item, I need a motion to discuss, amend, and improve PMD approved updates to the table 5.1 scope of practice. If you could please say your name with the motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Dr. Madam. Can I get a second, please?
Bob Ramsey, second.
Thank you very much, Bob. So there are two versions that you should have received in a separate email as well as in your packet. The one is a clean version, kind of the final recommended changes from PMD. The version that's currently presenting on your screen is the version that has quite a few of the changes that have been recommended by PMD. I just wanted to highlight kind of some general changes when we went through this. quite a few of the updates and changes were really terminology because this has not been updated in quite some time. Some of the verbiage was just outdated, and so things like oral tracheal intubation was changed to endotracheal intubation. So several of the changes were really more grammatical. There were some kind of global concepts that the national scope of practice has moved away from, one of which was patient-assisted medications. In the national scope of practice, this was removed. Their feeling was that many medications that are at the BLS level are now within scope of practice for EMTs, and that the term medication assistance to assist a patient was somewhat confusing both for the provider, so the EMCT, as well as the educator. Really, how are you assisting a patient in giving themselves an injection? You're most likely actually administering the injection. And from the national scope, they felt that it made more sense to move that out of scope of practice nationally. There were some other things that were kind of felt to be dated, like a selling maneuver, so things like that that were taken out of the national scope. Umbilical initiation for IV access, that has not been in national scope for quite some time. We did do some research with pediatric EM specialists to see if this is something they routinely did. It is not, and recommendation was to move that out. Quite a few of the STRs were under the EMTI category. We did run a query in Arizona to determine how many EMTIs we have. We have, out of the 22,000 plus EMCTs, 13 currently in Arizona. We are not sure if any of them are still currently practicing at that level or not. There were 3 different types of Christ maneuvers in our original version. We've just combined that down to 1 that is matching national scope. There are a few things that we do in Arizona that are not in the national scope, and so we created an Arizona-specific section at the end. And there's kind of 2 newer, relatively newer airway in kind of devices that really have become the standard of care, one of which is CPAP, which is really being recommended down to the EMT level and higher. So that is one of the proposed changes. Then also high-flow nasal cannula for paramedics. Both of these are really extremely beneficial for improving patient outcomes. There was quite a bit of debate at PMD regarding 2 items, which was nasal and pharyngeal swab, as well as immunizations. Certainly with COVID, that has kind of brought this to light in terms of whether we should allow this and add this to scope of practice. And so I wanted to just highlight that that is something for this group to maybe spend a little bit of time discussing. And then I think it's been probably 2 years ago, MDC approved IM epinephrine for anaphylaxis at the EMT level with their medical director approval. We had created through the education committee the training curriculum, and then recognized that we had put the cart before the horse because it was not not approved yet in scope of practice. So that is kind of being addressed in a few different places in here. So that's kind of a highlight of the changes. Brian, I know you spent quite a bit of time of this. Franco, you were also actively involved in the PMD discussion as the PMD chair. So I will kind of start that piece. Hopefully you guys have had some time to review this, and I'll open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Hi, it's Brian. I guess I'll go first. I gave somebody, tried to give somebody a chance to jump in there, first. So I have one concern related to the one section about the medical director approved medication and disconnecting that from, at least to some degree, from our drug box table. So I'll get into that in a minute. Another thing that has kind of come up is there is the 2019 scope of practice model has been approved at the national level. That was originally completed in 2007. That was the first version of what we're dealing with in a national scope of practice model that was developed. Then 2 years later, in 2009, the national education standards were developed to go along with that and to define the educational aspect of that. And then shortly after that, the instructional guidelines came out. In 2009, we formed a task force to do a gap analysis between the DOT, the 1998, for example, the 1984 and 1998 curriculum packages, what were it used to be called curriculum packages for EMTs and paramedics and IMT 99s, and to compare that between what the national scope of practice looked like, what we determined was actually being practiced in Arizona, and then comparing that to the DOT curriculum. But when we started that, we had a big piece of the puzzle, and that's the EMS core content, the national scope of practice model, and then the educational standards. So this is ultimately also going to be coming into the new EMT program, or it should ultimately, because it takes those three packages now to develop the way EMS works versus where we used to have a curriculum. So we don't have a set of national education standards to go along with the new national scope of practice model. That is supposed to have been being worked on this summer. And yeah, I don't know where they're at in it due to COVID-19 issues. So we don't currently have a national education standard to go along with any of these changes. And I know we've talked about we could put packages together to go ahead and do this, but I don't know that necessarily also comes back and addresses initial certification education. So that's one aspect of my concern, is I'm kind of feeling like maybe we're jumping the gun just a little bit on doing this. And if we approved it to go forward, and then when the national education standards come out, we connected at that time, that would be fine also. My other concern is with this, it has become with the section on medical director approved medications. An example in here is, and I'm not sure I like any disconnect between this and the EMT drug box list, although I understand some of this may have been easier to do than having STRs and things like that. But I'd like to give it one example here is intranasal opioid antagonist for suspected opioid overdose for the EMT level. And all of this, most of my concern is related to medical direction requirements for EMTs. And there's a specific statute. It is A.R.S. 36-2228. It authorizes a physician, a nurse practitioner, to prescribe and initiate a standing order for emergency medical technicians, peace officers, and other ancillary law enforcement employees to administer opioid antagonists via an intranasal route. And that technically then doesn't require medical direction as we understand it and have applied it in Arizona, because none of those people necessarily meet the requirement for being a medical director in Arizona. So this is an example where today EMTs can go download Dr. Chris' prescription from the opioid segment of the website and go get nasal Narcan or naloxone through the public health office and be able to administer. And they don't necessarily have to have medical director's ability to do that. So that's one example, and there's some other things on here that I think they may be able to do, like oral aspirin for chest pain for suspected ischemic origin is currently taught and is available to and is on the drug box list for EMTs to be able to administer. That's also true of oral glucose for suspected hypoglycemia. By placing this under the requirement for a medical director to do this means that we're taking stuff away from them that they can currently do without medical direction, because EMTs do not require medical direction for their scope of practice in Arizona. So I've kind of come back and feel like there's some things we need to look at. Some of the way this is written in this particular section, I believe, is in contradiction to the definition of an advanced life support provider, a basic life support provider, and then in A.R.S. 36-2205 in paragraph A, the portion that says that advanced life support providers need medical direction to do certain things. It does not say that EMTs need medical direction to do certain things. And these things are going to be in the scope of practice of EMTs. Some of them already are. And I'm concerned about putting medical direction requirements, which essentially means every EMT in the state of Arizona is going to end up in that place. I don't have any problems with any of the rest of this document. It's just how that section has turned out reading. And it seems to me there's kind of a disconnect where we have two areas now on determining what kind of medications we can administer between this section. That would be true for the other areas also, for the other certification levels also. And then having table 1 with medications on it also. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Brian. So just to kind of clarify, if you look through this, outside of the section 5, are there other areas that you have concerns about, just so we can maybe narrow the conversation and address it piece by piece?
The main things I have are, my biggest issue here is this requirement for many of these items under the EMT level to require medical direction in order to be able to do. Whether we can work around between table 1 and some of the other certification levels, we may be able to do that and it will work fine. I'm concerned about EMTs being able to do things in the state of Arizona without everybody having to go get medical direction, which statutorily is not required.
So I'm not sure. I know Ethan had a hearing he was participating in. I don't know, Ethan or Terry, that's certainly, I think both of you are much more well-versed in that piece.
I think that we should, I don't exactly know how to answer that question without being able to sit down on a one-on-one basis with Brian and walk through that. I would suggest that we go ahead and continue to see what other people say and then just follow the group's wishes at this point, and then we will take that information and make an internal analysis.
Well, this is Bob Ramsey. What Brian is saying about EMTs are not required by statute. They're not required to have medical direction is correct. So we certainly got to be careful about not being in violation of the statute in that regard. So, but I don't know how that weaves through the document.
So let me give you, this is Brian again. Let me give you an example of one particular scope of practice that was addressed at the EMT level at the PMD meeting. And that was for CPAP. CPAP has been added into the basic EMT scope of practice as a check mark. It's not an STR anymore. And I specifically asked questions at the time and made comment that I was okay with putting it into the scope of practice as a check mark, but not if somehow that ultimately came back to mean that it required medical direction to do so. And so that was passed through without any further changes to it. So now EMTs will be able to do CPAP without medical direction. So that demonstrates to me that EMTs we can delineate that practice between what EMTs need medical direction for, and that's now allegedly going to be a part of the basic scope of practice for EMTs. And that went through without medical direction. So to me, there's a disconnect here to do these other items and require medical direction for them, particularly since many of them they're.
So Brian, if I recall that conversation, we actually offered for some of those to be STRs, and that was your recommendation to not have it be a STR and to be a check mark. So I don't think anyone's trying to pull anything off here. There was lots of conversation about this, and certainly not trying to put something forward. I think certainly with CPAP for EMT level, there was quite a bit of discussion in regards to that one, of that being a STR, which then would be a medical director required, which would be for EMTs who have medical direction. So I think the PMD recommendations, it's up to this committee and MBC to approve or not approve. So that's just kind of the first step of the process. I want to make sure just because PMD approves something does not mean EMS Council and MDC need to.
No, I get that. I get that totally, and it wouldn't have bothered me for it to go in get moved down or as an STR. My understanding was to try to implement the recommendations from the National Scope of Practice model as much as possible with check marks at each level of certification, and have the STRs down in the Arizona section. So I understand trying to keep that format, and there's probably some value to keeping that format, but some of these things are going to conflict with statute in the state of Arizona, because when you go read this National Scope of Practice model for 2019, that it implies that EMTs have medical direction. And there's big descriptions at the start of that document that talks about medical direction for all the different levels. So their brain, when they put this together like this, is that, well, there's going to be medical directors who are approving this. However, that conflicts with the statutes in Arizona not requiring medical direction for EMTs. So if you were operating in the state that their statute said that everybody, and including EMTs, have to have medical direction to do these things, then sure, leave it like that. But it kind of doesn't fit with what's going on in Arizona right now.
Gail, this is Dan Spate. I certainly am not in the weeds on the details of this, but what I would say is we clearly should be aware of the risk of setting up a system where we can end up, ironically, with the lowest certification being able to do medical procedures like CPAP without medical direction, when, of course, ironically, a paramedic has to have medical direction to do CPAP, et cetera. And so I don't know the details of this well enough to know, but we obviously need to close any potential loopholes like that where we inadvertently could end up with medical procedures being done without medical direction at the EMT level because of the statutory asterisk, if you will. And then just a simple question would be, are those issues complex enough that it would help you for this to go back for further discussion and tabling. I'm not making a motion. I'm just asking, trying to help you for the purpose of efficiency and to make sure we don't make a mistake that creates a problem for lack of medical direction and medical procedures.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Brian, do you have a recommended amendment you would like to make to this? Otherwise, I think we would potentially have to table this entire discussion for further.
No, actually, I was going to make a motion. It was my intent to make a motion after some discussion to table this and send it back to PMD to relook at how this has kind of turned out and make sure that EMTs are able to do the things that's well within their educational background, and that we make that we can come back and look at the STR issues where those are appropriate to be able to do.
And just so that we get the correct minutes for PMD, besides CPAP, was there any other EMT new ad for scope of practice that could be a STR, just so we make sure we gather that?
I don't know that I can answer that off the top of my head because I spent most of the last couple of days just kind of looking at statutes more in relationship to this, just the strict medical direction issue for some of these. I don't think there was anything that jumped out at me, but I would have to go back and take a look again.
Okay. I believe that the only ad, and that was the one we did debate quite a bit, was CPAP was making that a check mark. So in terms of all of them, so of the 4 pages, I think that is the one line that could easily be made back to STR if PMD so chooses to make that recommendation. And then I think your discussion is that you feel that the Section 5 medical director approved medications, just in the interest of PMD's time, because they have other workloads they need to do, I'd like to take back specific pieces for them to go over and not to redo the entire document again. So we can certainly have them look at line on Section 1, skills CPAP, and then medical director approved medications, that entire section. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is Bob. If it helps, I'll withdraw my motion. And then it can be tabled.
I think we could table it without withdrawing the motion.
You can table inside the motion.
Yes, but I'm withdrawing. If the second withdraws, then it'll go down if we return. It doesn't matter either way.
All right. For anyone else on the call, are there any other items that they feel that they would like addressed by PMD, just so that we can make sure we take back the appropriate workload to them?
Yeah, I think the remainder is good.
Pardon?
No other recommendations.
Thank you. All right. So I think we still officially have the open motion, and then I think maybe a cleaner version is just to take a motion to table that. Is there a motion or a second to table this?
Brian will make a motion to table this.
And I'll second that from May 10.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of tabling this until the next meeting?
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion is tabled. Thank you. Next up, if I can get a motion to discuss, amend, and approve updates to bylaws.
May 10, so move.
Can I get
Second,
a
Brian.
second? Thank you, Dr. Madam and Brian. So just a quick update on this. So we do update the bylaws every 3 years. Dr. Johnson led a subcommittee of members from the 3 statutory councils who reviewed the bylaws, attached as an updated version, which includes recommended changes both from that subcommittee as well as the Bureau. We did offer this for that subcommittee to review one more time, and they did not feel a second meeting was needed. So these are the proposed bylaws attached and being presented right now. If I could have some time for us to review them and any discussion. Any recommended amendments to the bylaws? All right, hearing no amendments, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, bylaw update is approved. Thank you very much. Next, agenda items to be considered for the next meeting. Are there any items the committee would like to have added to the agenda for next meeting? If you think of any between now and January, you can send them to either Shelley Bissell or myself, and we'll make sure we add those to the agenda. Next, call to the public. Summary of current events. I will not read through those as they are constantly changing and many are moving to virtual. Next meeting is January 21st, 2021 at 10:30 a.m. This will definitely have a virtual option and likely will be an only virtual option, but we will see where things pan out over the next few months. If I can get a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved, Brian.
Second.
Second. There you go.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.